can you tell me a little bit about Green Door Initiative and how did this whole thing start and some of the things that you guys are doing right now?
Sure. So the Green Door Initiative was established in 2010, really following my exit from the Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice. And in July 2010, we decided that there was some intentional work that remained to be done around environmental justice, particularly when it comes to workforce development, youth leadership development, and a continuation of public policy advocacy around environmental health, particularly when it comes to community-based participatory research. So those are the three areas. The mission of the Green Door Initiative is to ensure that everyone has the ability to live out and promote a sustainable lifestyle. And what does that mean? We look at workforce development as key. Someone has to clean it up, someone has to maintain, someone has to rebuild, someone has to ensure protection. And when it comes to the infrastructure in our communities, where environmental justice plays a role is that the most vulnerable tend to bear the greatest burden of decisions around the environment and how to protect it, and rarely gets to enjoy benefits. Economic justice is just as important as environmental justice, and they're twins. And when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about environment, we're talking about economic, social justice. There are three prongs to sustainability, and that was a deliberate approach the Green Door Initiative took. Let's work to ensure that people in our community have access to training in the environmental sector, and let's match them with employers and or assist in any way possible for them to become their own employers and become heroes in the community when it comes to environmental protection. So we launched our first job training program, environmental careers training program, in 2011 with funding from the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences. At the time, the program was called the Minority Worker Training Program, and it created especially for those bearing the burden and not reaping the benefits of cleanup and rebuilding their communities. Too often we've seen folks that are indigenous to communities like Detroit sit on the sideline and watch others come in from other places and have jobs, and they're doing the work that people in this community have not really had the privilege of doing. So that's how we set out to do the work around environmental human resources, if you will. Our motto for that particular program is we restore hope for people while providing help to the planet. And we intentionally go recruit folks who would have structural barriers to employment, because I'm really excited about disproving this discourse that people in our communities are not ready for work. They can't work, and I just think that's not true. And so we've been.
You were talking about the work at Green Door.
Yes, and so I shared about our environmental careers training program. And since our inception, we've trained over 200 individuals. We've received awards and recognition for our placement rate in the industry, which is around 94%. And we're excited about even the number of individuals that have started their own companies and or nonprofits as a result of our training. They get certified and licensed in a variety of entities that helps them become even more competitive in the industry. So we're excited about that. The other work that we do has to do with ensuring a healthy transition of leadership when it comes to environmental justice leadership in our community, and brings us to this idea of deep leadership immersion and training among young people. So it's always been core to our work and our values that we make opportunities available for young people in our community. One, to introduce them to the industry, You rarely see people of color and young African Americans in particular employed in the industry, and they're rarely even introduced to it. So we've had the privilege of being a host site over several years when it comes to summer employment and introducing young people in our community to the industry. And most recently, we've received direct resources from the Department of Natural Resources through their Summer Youth Employment Program. And we hire young people every summer, about 20 to 25 of them, 16 and 19-year-olds. And they have a pretty extensive summer doing environmental projects, citizen science work, that includes like water collection. We actually did a project in Flint with Job Corps students and taught them how to put on filters and be a resource in their community when the whole issue hit around their water quality. And when we do beach monitoring. Detroit, Belle Isle Beach is one of those beaches you never hear about being shut down for any kind of issues, which may lull someone into a false sense of security and think that all things are well. Well, there are no laws that require that beaches are shut down because of E. coli or anything else. So the resources where you find, say, suburban beaches being shut down, is because citizens have really organized and made that a policy of great value in their communities. And that's not really the same in Detroit. And so we train young people on how to actually take water samples. We work with entities to be able to review those samples and teach young people how to do public service announcements and other things so that they can alert the public about the health and well-being of our only public access beach. So we also train them on a number of other things around air quality, brownfield sites, just give them a gamut. They learn about invasive species. We've taken them on several adventures, if you will, at several state parks and others where they've actually had the opportunity, say, to remove Phragmites and whatever from a particular place, and or teach them on some basic construction skills so they can make repairs on cabins and picnic tables and things like that. But they also get trained on issues around hazmat and pollution and public policy. And so as a result of that work, we were able to go after some resources with the Michigan Humanities Council. They have a foundation who just started a project called the Third Coast Conversations. And through a partnership with the Alliance for the Great Lakes, we were encouraged to go after that resource. And we're fulfilling the commitment to that grant right now. The unique approach we've taken with the conversations is that we would invest in young people and teach them how to become facilitators so they can manage these conversations and practice these conversations across the city. And they function as co-facilitators with experts in the arena or the area. And this is just, like I said, sort of a deep immersion into leadership development and providing some real content and structure that would help them better understand what they are up against. We also have a project and so through that work, we call that our Code Green Project, Champions Owning Detroit's Environment Project. And under that umbrella, we have a little project around climate change called Code, C-O-L-D. And that project, Climate Organizers Leading Detroit. And that project really was developed, I have to give credit to my son, who's involved as a young person in climate change work internationally. as well as nationally. And he thought it would be really cool to create something that would help young people in our community begin to engage in the international conversations around climate and bring an urban voice to that stage. So we collaborated and came up with a process around code, and the goal is to get young people to attend the Conference of Parties meetings that happen all over the world. There's nothing new about young people being involved in that conversation. Young people have been involved for decades, but urban youth have not. And so we really want to make certain that we are added to that conversation. So the Code Project is set up for that. And our first attempt to get a group of young people to attend a meeting was in France in Paris during the Paris Accord. But because of the terrorist activities that took place, the parents who did give us permission to take their young people was like, I don't think so. And so we've kind of regrouped and put that on hold, but that is something that we're still, we consider that very vital. And so this whole water piece is critical to climate change. And one of the reasons that we even do the Code Green, in my opinion, is so that we can have a voice in the International Joint Commission work that take place on the Great Lakes. So it's still kind of connected, and I'm looking forward to that really growing and taking root. We do also public policy work. We train folks. We partner with the University of Michigan in helping to train citizens around policy and how it works. And I've been doing that for a long time. And then community-based participatory research, that's one reason I'm connected to CURES at their invitation. I've been a long time contributor to the body of work when it comes to community-based participatory research. I'm one of those people who really believe that researchers and academicians should not be dictating what when it comes to what kind of research takes place, and that there really was core to my set of values around this is that everyone gets to decide what the priorities are going to be around research, ensure efficacy that honors everyone's health and well-being in the process. We don't want any more Tuskegees and Baltimores or whatever, right? So community-based participatory research is really a value that I hold up high. And now there are new iterations of that, community-led research and others. I really value that process. And so trying to stay current and relevant when it comes to that, to ensure that people in our communities are not taken advantage of. And then of course, finally, I think our core work around public health and ensuring that folks of color and poor people have protection when it comes to exposure to environmental health issues like air pollution and water quality and those kind of things. So I do a lot of work locally, but I do much more of my work at a national level when it comes to that kind of work. So, yeah.
So you mentioned your especially your youth-focused works, and I wonder if the lead contamination in the Detroit public schools tap system, water system, is something that you are taking on.
Well, it's funny because in my walk with the previous organization, that was an issue then. With Detroit Public Schools, absolutely. It has been an issue, a long history. And if you Google the issue of water, drinking fountain issues in the city of Detroit, that will pop up in the 90s. So a dude by the name of Randall Raymond, who was an educator with Detroit Public Schools, spearheaded a research project around what he believed was an issue of neglect and abuse when it came to the children in Detroit, and particularly those who were attending Detroit Public Schools in the buildings that they had to be educated in. So he spearheaded this lead exposure research. If you Google his name, that project should come up. And as a result of that,
here's a matching.
We've did I activate Siri's?
Apparently, my phone is weird.
That happens sometimes. As a result of his work, he got fired. He was a educator at Cass Tech. People ignored the results of that study. Thousands of children, he believed, were lead poisoned just by coming to school. And so I remember working on a project at Cass Tech, the old Cass Tech building, I think McKenzie High School, several old buildings that are no longer in existence, where water, drinking fountains were compromised, and working with young people at that time to get them to take on some of the leadership role in policy, making their issues known to policymakers, the Board of Education, and that kind of thing. That being said, I'm glad to see that VD, the new and the current superintendent, has taken initiative to at least shut the system down, although I think it's deplorable that children have to, they can't rely on that resource coming into their buildings healthily. And I think something needs to be done. Have we taken it on? No, we just don't have the capacity to take it on, but I certainly support anybody that's taking it on. You know, the young people in our program, we try to inform them and provide them with the basic data and information that helps them articulate some of those concerns and create ultimately some leadership within buildings, school buildings that are led by young people. So,
what is going on that front? You know, now that I think about it, I mean, other than knowing that they, shut the water down.
Right. I'm not sure if anything else. I was talking to one of our students who you did not get to meet. He's been having some challenges, health challenges. He happened to be a student at Cass Tech. And we were talking about, he really wants to take on some leadership role around Belle Isle beach cleanups projects. So we were really talking about that. But then he said, Ms. Donnell, we have a lot going on at our school building. And the biggest one is the fact that we can't drink out of the water fountain. That's a relatively new building. This is not an old building. So that being said, this goes back to our infrastructure, the municipality infrastructures and whatever. I would suspect that they're under the wire or just under the radar when it comes to how to work this situation out, because this is bigger than the school district. But at least he took a bold step in at least acknowledging it up front, making it known once he presumably learned about the situation, and providing cleaner water. But that's something we need to sort of follow up on, I believe. And maybe with this water conversation piece, that can be an assignment that we can make available to our team of young people.
Where do you see this situation going?
At Detroit Public Schools?
Well, in Detroit in general.
Oh, in general, just as overall.
Affordability, security, contamination. Where do you see this headed toward?
I see that the whole water issue will be the number one social equity issue in our time. in the coming years. Complicated by climate and the crises around a really fragile infrastructure and the legal inappropriate access that industry have to the cleanest resource in the world when it comes to water, the Great Lakes. There's going to be a convergence. And I can't recall the name of this poem that speaks to the fact that when they messed with this certain population, people ignored it and said, well, that's them and it's not me, right? And I think that's where we are. A lot of people are thinking that's those lowly Detroit, black folks or whatever, those lowly Flint black people. That's not us. And I think in a lot of ways we're seen as the canary in the mine, and we're not the only ones. And if we don't get in front of this, we're going to see a huge problem in our region, in our state, and even in the Midwest. It's not a issue that is only sort of experienced by folks in our communities and in this area. I mean, this is a national and international crisis. Water is the number one topic that we have to get, wrestle with and address. Where is it going? I'm a hopeful person. That's why I'm in this industry and this work anyway. You have to be crazy or you have to be filled with hope. What is worth fighting for? And I simply believe there are a lot of folk that think like me, that I have the privilege of working with and can be connected to, who also believe it's worth fighting for. And on our watch, we're going to do that. For myself, I can't imagine this critical issue not being something I tackle on my watch.
What gives you that best hope?
Well, I have to tell you that I am a believer of Jesus Christ, first and foremost. And how I worship and what I believe I've been born to do, that's my hope. I have an assignment, and I'm on this assignment. And I'm going to maintain the assignment and do my best. And I happen to believe that I serve an all-knowing God, an all-powerful God, and in his imminent wisdom, he decided that I should be a part of this work. And if he did, he had to have some inkling of what the future looks like, because he's assigned his best to do it. So that is what gives me hope. And as I look into my little 4-year-old granddaughter's face, she deserves for me to be doing what I was born to do. So, and as she observes me and her dad, who's observed me as he grew up, then she has some inkling of what she may be required to do in her lifetime as well.
What can we do going forward? We started this conversation today. We talked about responsibility. We talked about accountability. We talked about the clout that a lot of corrupt regulators as well as corporations have. And so, when faced with these odds, a lot of people get intimidated, confused. And so, what can we do? Whether it's ordinary people or whether it's community organizers or community members, how can we, hold all of these different entities accountable?
I think the project that you've undertaken is a good way to begin a conversation with folks who may not see themselves in the work or responsible for moving this work along. Everyone is an all hands on deck kind of urgency that everyone needs to take hold of, and in their own way understand what they can bring to it to bring some kind of remedy to this problem. As human beings, we all need to be able to drink clean and healthy water. There's an urgency for everyone. That being said, there are, I believe, key sort of folks absent from the movement. I think there's a greater role that academics can play. I think there's a greater role that folks that are not African American and Latina and Asian can get in and have their voices heard to support an agenda that uplifts us all. It's one thing to hear from me. In fact, people would expect it. It's another thing to hear from folks who you don't expect to promote this idea that everyone is entitled to enjoy a healthy environment, a healthy earth. And I know that sounds corny, but I believe that is all of our problem. I'm grateful that of late the healthcare industry has been a little bit more involved in environmental justice work, right? They've been a missing element. Even public health as an industry has been a missing voice and a missing element in this topic and in this conversation. So the more we become knowledgeable about how exposures, inappropriate environmental exposures, impact health outcome, that it gets beyond behavior and population behavior and becomes one that acknowledges there's something beyond the ability to make a decision. There's something going on. Someone else is making decisions. And if we don't add a certain voice, like the healthcare community or health providers, whatever you want to call them, people listen to them, right? They're a credible voice. That's an example of, in my opinion, of sort of being missing in action, right? How do we align research and stuff in a way that aids in informing public policy, for instance, and not just a notch on a researcher's, sort of list so that they can get tenure or something? How do we, or published, right? Like, how can we make these leaps to connect with the real world outside of the walls of academia and other places? That's the key. So I think concepts like cures at Wayne State University or the Urban Research Center at the University of Michigan and similar projects across institutions help to model something that's possible, helps to inform policy in a way that we all need to embrace. So everyone has a role, whether you're grassroots, grass tops, organizers, whatever you are, you have a role, and step into the role. You have a voice and you have power, step into it. Don't miss the opportunity to be a change agent. And we all have that ability.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just get silence?
Actually, I have one last question.
Okay.
Though. The question was really about I asked you to think about a story or of a person or an experience who has moved you or inspired you or maybe shocked you in some ways related to water.
Related to water.
Or environmental injustice in general.
Well, I'll make two observations. In the general, environmental justice general, there was a 10-year-old by the name of Xavier Joe who died in his mother's arms because he could not breathe. And the story at the time, in the early 2000s, in Detroit, was that, hey, the EMS trucks or whatever didn't make it to their house. She didn't have access to transportation. She could not get her child to a hospital in time. He came to his mom and said, "I can't breathe." And that's where she sat in her driveway, holding him, hoping that somebody would help her get her baby to the hospital. It was too late for Xavier. Xavier Joel's life is so inspirational to me, because I think it's a shame that children have to die because they can't breathe. Well, everybody was, and as they should, sort of outdone by the fact that an EMT couldn't get out there. I was outdone for the fact, why is this child not able to breathe? Right? And that's a conversation that rarely gets had, that rarely takes place. The second piece, and it has to do with children as well, there were 12,000 children poisoned in Flint. And I have the image of this little boy, and I do not know his name, and his mom. It is a little PowerPoint slide that I have. And she's trying to wipe what appears to be a rash off of his face. And he was clearly very uncomfortable. And they believe it was a result of using the water in Flint. And his body was covered in this rash. So as I think about these two little ones, I'm motivated to help make that a different kind of story for others. Because children didn't decide what zip code to be born into. Children didn't decide what ethnicity to be born into. Children didn't decide what neighborhood to be born into. They didn't make any of those kind of decisions, but they suffer greatly. They don't get to vote. They don't have a say, but they certainly bear the burdens. And I'm motivated to make certain that there is a voice for them, that someone's speaking on their behalf, someone's standing up for what we believe is right. Every child deserves to breathe clean air. Every child deserves to drink clean and healthy water, play on playgrounds free from contamination, soil, and leaded paint on playground equipment. Every child deserves to go into a school building free from pollution and contaminants that hinder their ability to learn. These are the basics, and I'm motivated by that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.